Welcome, everyone. We're happy to have you here at our webinar titled Eat Smart, Eat Well for a Healthy Colon. I'm pleased to introduce one of our community partners. She is a profound leader of the cancer support community of Greater St. Louis. She's the program manager of the organization. Without further ado, I introduce you to the lovely Miss Danny Hodges. Danny,
thank you,
take it away.
Keisha. Thank you. I want to welcome everyone to the webinar today. As Keisha said, this is titled Eat Smart, Eat Well for a Healthy Colon. And the purpose of this webinar is to encourage healthy eating habits for colorectal health. And it will focus on the medical benefits of eating healthy to improve individuals' colon health. We'll learn the types of foods to eat to avoid the types of foods to eat and to avoid to enhance our colon health, and some inexpensive recipes to support colon function. And this webinar will also include a survivor's journey toward a healthy lifestyle after treatment. So before we get started, there are a couple housekeeping items I would like to address. First of all, I want to remind you that you will be muted during the webinar, but you can put any questions that you have in the chat for the Q&A period later. We'll get to those questions. I also want to let you know that there will be a pre-test and a post-test. So I think the pre-test is going to be displayed on your screen. If you see that, there it is. So you can take a minute right now to go ahead and take that pre-test. At the end of the webinar, there will be a post-test. So now I would like to introduce the panelists by their name and title, and then we will start with the first presenter. But to introduce the entire panelist, first we have Dr. Damon Clines, who is a gastroenterologist. We have Rachel Kleinman, a registered dietitian. We have Kathleen Finneran, a colon cancer survivor. And we have Maria Ojascastro, who is a teaching artist and culinary instructor. So we will begin our first presentation with Dr. Damon Clines. Dr. Clines, go ahead, sir.
Good morning. First, I'd like to thank Keisha for giving me the invite. This is a very important topic in my world. And what I thought I would do is kind of just do a quick, brief overview of colorectal cancer in the United States before we get into the real meat of the program, which is healthy eating and foods to promote a healthy colon. Keisha, can we have the first slide, please? Be number 2. Okay. So it's important to remember that colorectal cancer is a very common cancer. It's actually the number 2 cancer killer in this country. It's the 3rd most common cancer. And one of the things about colon cancer that is rather unique is that it is, of all the cancers, it's probably the most preventable cancer of all the cancers that we see. You can reduce the incidence of colon cancer by up to 90% if people just get a screening colonoscopy. Let's go to number 3, Keisha, please. So, as I just mentioned, this is a question I like to pose to people all the time, and that is, what common cancer can you prevent with screening? Is it prostate cancer? No. Breast cancer? No. Colorectal cancer? Yes. By getting your colonoscopies at the appropriate times, you can absolutely reduce your risk of colon cancer. About number 4, Keisha. So why is colon cancer screening important? Well, the important thing about colon cancer screening is that you can prevent, not just detect, colon cancer with a colonoscopy. We often use the term colon cancer screening, but what we're actually looking for are polyps. Polyps are the precancerous growths that we remove during your colonoscopy. Let's move to number 7, Keisha, please. So what are polyps? So polyps are just little small clumps of cells that line the colon. Most polyps are harmless, but because polyps can progress to cancer, we do screening colonoscopies, and when we detect these polyps, we remove them. Polyps, not all polyps turn into cancer, but typically all cancers usually will start as a polyp. Let's go to number 17, please. So what are some of the symptoms of colorectal cancer? Let's go to number 19. So most early colorectal cancers typically don't produce any symptoms. That's why it's very important to get a screening colonoscopy. But if you do have symptoms, you should never ignore them. You should reach out to your healthcare provider with symptoms, regardless of your age. But the thing I really want to stress here is that most early cancers produce no symptoms at all. And so that's why getting your screening at the appropriate times is so important. Number 21, please. So what should I do? What should you do if you don't have any symptoms of colon cancer? Well, you should get screened. Excuse me. Screening means getting checked at the appropriate times that we'll talk about later, but it's recommended that people have regular screening intervals at different ages and stages of their lives. Let's go to number 30, please. So one of the things I really want to, that's number 31, I believe, Keisha. Go to the one before that. Yeah. One of the things I really want to stress is that screening in African Americans, the recommendations have changed over the last several years. In fact, the American College of Gastroenterology was recommending almost 10 years ago that African Americans be screened at a younger age. And that age we have now determined is age 45. We know that African Americans with colon cancer have decreased survival compared with other ethnic groups. So as a result of this, we've begun screening African Americans at an earlier age. The other important thing I want to mention just real briefly about the different screening modalities is that, there are several different screening modalities. We could talk more about it later, but they've been broken out into tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So colonoscopy is the only one-step test. And by one step, I mean it's the only test that you can do that doesn't require a second step. So if I'm doing a screening colonoscopy and I find a polyp, I can remove that polyp at the time of the colonoscopy. All the other tests are two-step tests. By that, I mean if you have a FIT test or a Cologuard or virtual colonoscopy, if any of those tests are positive, then you require a second step. You require the second step of getting a colonoscopy. And that's one thing, particularly in the recent, months and years with, the commercials on TV with the little blue guy in the box and, promoting Cologuard, which I think is a fine test. But it's not a tier 1 test. It's not the test that's recommended for screening purposes. And it's not intended for everybody. If you've had colon polyps before, then Cologuard is not a test for you. It's only for average risk people. So I just want to put that out there, and we'll talk a little more about that later. The bottom line is get screened at the appropriate times and ages, and you can significantly reduce your risk of ever getting colon cancer. We'll talk more about the other benefits of certain foods and things in the program. There are people who are much more, much better at explaining those kind of things and have much more expertise than I, but suffice it to say that what I've gone over here are things that I think are very important. I just wanted to start off the talk with these things as a brief overview. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Klein. I'll introduce our next speaker. Next, we'll be hearing from our registered dietitian, Rachel Kleinman. Rachel, go ahead.
Perfect, thank you. Here, hold on, let me share my presentation with you guys. All right, so as previously mentioned, my name is Rachel Kleinman. I am a registered dietitian and diabetes educator working at Food Outreach, specialize specifically in diabetes, HIV, and cancer. That's where all my clients come from. So I do interact with people with colorectal cancer quite a lot. And today I wanted to share some tips about colorectal cancer prevention, and then also a little bit about what to do for people who are receiving active cancer treatment. All right, so first, something that you have probably heard from every single doctor that you have ever interacted with, regardless of whether they're talking about cancer risk or heart disease or really a variety of other things. One of the most helpful things that you can do to prevent colorectal cancer and really a variety of other things is to increase your fiber intake. So the main thing that increasing fiber intake is going to do is to help increase your stool bulk, dilute fetal carcinogens, and decrease the transit time. So that kind of means that it is taking things that are in your digestive system that could be a little harmful, not necessarily like toxins, you don't need to worry too much about that, but free radicals and stuff like that, and helping flush them out. So you definitely want to make sure you're having fiber. It's also excellent, not just for your digestive system, but for heart health, diabetes risk, all kinds of other things. So fiber is going to come from several places, but probably the most helpful places you'll find it are going to be fruits and vegetables. So fresh, canned, or frozen produce are all great options. Really any produce that you have access to is going to be awesome. And you do want to make sure you're having a variety of different colors of the fruits and vegetables. So having plenty of green fruits and vegetables, but also orange ones, yellow ones, red ones. They all carry their own different benefits related to the pigments they have, and they're all excellent options. And those different pigments come with different antioxidants. And antioxidants are something that protects our cells against cancer-causing free radicals. So it's something that we want to make sure that we're having in our diet every single day. Ideally, up to 5 or more servings a day of fruit and vegetables are recommended. But if right now you're not really having any, just having 1, 2, 3 is going to be great. Any small increase you can do is helpful in the prevention of all kinds of different things. And then something else that you can do to increase your fiber intake, this is something that most people associate with fiber, is going to be increasing your whole grain consumption. So you want to make half of the grains you consume whole grains. So I gave some examples of what a whole grain looks like down here. So we've got oatmeal, whole wheat bread, whole grain pasta, brown rice, barley, quinoa, even popcorn is a great example of a whole grain. Corn itself is a whole grain. So you want to try to have about 3 servings of those guys per day, or just trying to make half the grains that you consume whole grains. So if you are having like a sandwich every day for lunch, try adding in just wheat bread instead of white bread, and you can get a little extra benefit of that fiber, which is always a great option for you, right? So now I want to talk about things that we might want to limit if you want to reduce your colorectal cancer risk. So you want to limit intake of certain meats. So most notably, those meats are going to be red meats, example, beef or lamb. So you want to aim to consume less than 3 servings of red meat per week, ideally. And that's just like over the course of your entire life. So if one week you're notably having red meat every single day, maybe the next week you don't have it all balances out. Just try to be mindful about 3-ish servings per week. And then the other thing you want to limit there is going to be processed meats like hot dogs, bacon, sausage, deli meat, those kind of guys. They're very high in sodium and high in some other like trans fats and stuff like that. So you want to aim to consume about a serving per week if you're going to have any. Again, this is something that you can enjoy in moderation. I do not want you cutting bacon out of your life forever. It is delicious. I recognize that. So making sure you're just being mindful. If you did have a week where you had it almost every day, just be a little more mindful the next week to have a little bit less, because it is the average over like your entire life. So there. Then you also want to be mindful of food preparation methods. So you might have heard that certain food preparation methods are associated with colorectal cancer risk. So I might just wanted to go through those with you. So that is mainly going to be anything that involves cooking meat at high temperatures. So you want to limit frying, barbecuing, and broiling whenever you can. And again, that does not mean you never need to do those things again. Barbecuing, especially around now, it's a great way to get some healthy lean protein that is delicious, adds a lot of flavor. It's great. You want to make sure that's just not something you're doing every single day. So limiting that to maybe a couple times a week for these guys. All right. And then the last thing I wanted to mention as far as nutrition goes, you want to reduce your alcohol intake, which is something that you've probably heard several times in a variety of things. But ideally, no alcohol is consumed at all. But I'm an adult and I recognize that is not realistic. Alcohol can be kind of fun. So if you are consuming alcohol, you want to aim to have less than 2 drinks a day for men and 1 drink a day for women. In fact, those guidelines may have, they're kind of in conjunction right now. They might be saying less than 1 drink a day for everybody. So I've got a graphic right here that just kind of shows you what 1 drink looks like. So for liquor, that would be about 1.5 ounces or a shot. Beer is going to be about 12 ounces, and then wine is going to be about 5 ounces. And if you are drinking wine, notably red wine has some properties in it, a few antioxidants that are associated with heart health. So if you're going to have wine, do that, but don't necessarily have like an entire bottle a day, if that makes sense. You also want to quit smoking or limit smoking in any capacity, because that can also lead to an increased colorectal cancer risk. So with all of these things, these are just steps that you can take to make yourself healthier in general. It's going to benefit your entire body and your cancer risk and a risk for a bunch of other things. But I do want to mention that cancer itself is not 100% preventable, unfortunately, even with the best diet. Notably, Steve Jobs only consumed a vegan diet high in whole grains, fruits, vegetables. I mean, that man was spending all his money on food. It was like the perfect diet, excellent stuff. And he still did, unfortunately, pass away from cancer. So you can be doing everything, all the right risk mitigation, anything, and still like cancer does have a lot of risk factors, and it is unfortunately genetic. So just keep that in mind. If you do receive a cancer diagnosis, it is not your fault. There are things that just happen, right? And now I want to go into a little bit into colorectal cancer treatment. So anyone who is receiving treatment, so you might not be actively receiving treatment now, but you might know somebody in your life who is receiving chemotherapy or radiation, not even just for colorectal cancer, but really any cancer in general. These are some great tips to help with making it through that. So the first one, this is helpful for really anybody in treatment, is eating small, frequent meals throughout the day. So when you're in cancer treatment, it's very common that you're going to be experiencing poor appetite or other side effects of that treatment, like nausea, diarrhea, constipation, vomiting, things that just don't make you feel very good. And making sure to have smaller, more frequent meals, it's more likely that you're going to reach your nutrient intake, and it's going to lessen the severity of side effects like nausea. In addition, if you are having a poor appetite, just a big, gigantic meal might be overwhelming, and you're less likely to eat that, if that makes sense. You also want to make sure that you are choosing high protein foods. So a high protein diet, just in general, but especially during cancer treatment, can prevent muscle loss and help with recovery from that treatment. So I've got kind of a list here. So protein foods are not necessarily just found in meat. You can also find them in dairy products, nuts, seeds, beans, tofu, edamame, forgot to mention before, but beans and nuts are also a great source of fiber. So get some nice fiber, some nice protein, great all around, love those guys. So you can definitely get plenty of protein regardless of how much meat you're eating. And then you want to make sure you're enjoying plenty of whole grains, fruits, and vegetables. So depending on where you're at in your treatment plan, if you just had surgery or you recently got an ostomy, you might be asked to limit these foods temporarily, but that's definitely something your doctor is going to bring up. It's not something that's just going to come out of the blue. And I'll talk about that one in a bit. You also want to make sure you're choosing sources of healthy fat. So this is important for anybody really who is alive, but especially for people receiving cancer treatments. Healthy fats are nutrient-dense foods that make it easier to meet your calorie needs, especially if you're struggling with poor appetite. They've also got plenty of other great things in there that can be helpful for heart health, cancer health, all kinds of things. We love these guys. So some examples of those healthy fats are going to be avocado, salmon, olive oil, nuts, seeds, and a whole variety of other things. So you can add those in your diet, but having like 1 or 2 of those guys a day at minimum is always going to be great. So we love those omega-3s, omega-6s, and stuff like that. Then you want to make sure that you are staying hydrated, which is, again, important for everybody, but especially in treatment. Many side effects of treatment do lead to dehydration, and dehydration can kind of increase the severity of certain symptoms and just make you feel very uncomfortable. So you want to make sure you're drinking at least 8 glasses of water per day, and people experiencing vomiting or diarrhea should be eating even more. Or drinking even more, just to make sure that they are not losing too much fluid during those times. And if you are experiencing frequent vomiting or diarrhea, you also might want to look into an electrolyte drink like Gatorade, even Pedialyte, something like that, to make sure you're not losing a ton of electrolytes there. All right, and then everyone who is receiving cancer treatment also should be practicing good food safety. Because foodborne illness is going to be a lot more likely to occur in people receiving treatment because the immune system is suppressed, and it's going to be a lot more severe for those undergoing cancer treatment. So whoever is preparing the food, whether it be that person themselves or a loved one who's preparing food for them, make sure you're washing your hands often before and while preparing your meals. Make sure you're rinsing off all fruits and vegetables prior to eating them, really always. And that even includes things like cantaloupe or avocado that do have something like, I guess a shell, not really a shell. They have something on the outside, because even though you're not going to be eating the rind, when you cut into that cantaloupe, everything that was outside the cantaloupe is now going with your knife into the cantaloupe. So just make sure you don't need to buy like a produce wash, just water is going to be totally fine. Give it a nice wash, nice little scrub if it's actively dirty, which sometimes melons are, depending on where it came from. So it's totally fine. Make sure you're using a different knife and a different cutting board for raw meat, raw fruits and vegetables, and any ready to eat food, just to prevent cross-contamination, because all the stuff from raw meat that does get into something that you're going to eat can cause things like salmonella, or that would be cooked out. But if you are not going to be cooking it, it's very important to do that. And you know what, it's just good to avoid that anyway. And then you want to make sure you're cooking all foods, but especially meat, to the proper temperature, and you're refrigerating those leftovers within 1 to 2 hours. So I've got a little chart here that tells you the different serving temperatures for meat. Say this is probably most important for things like chicken that do have that salmonella risk. If you don't have a meat thermometer already, you can usually find one pretty inexpensively for about $10 at the grocery store, Walmart, Target, wherever. And honestly, it's nice for peace of mind, especially for chicken, where it is kind of hard to tell for something like that when it's going to be done. All right, and then the last thing I wanted to go through for people with colorectal cancer specifically, if you are experiencing stomach discomfort or diarrhea, especially after surgery, the doctor might recommend you consume a soft diet. So this is going to be a little bit different from the recommendation I've been talking about earlier, but it can be very helpful while your colon and digestive system are not at their tip-top shape. So you want to choose low fiber grains like white bread instead of whole wheat grains like brown rice, barley, or granola. You want to choose soft cooked vegetables without skins or seeds instead of raw vegetables. Canned vegetables are already pretty much at this portion, so they're a great option. I've got some green beans in the corner that are awesome for this. You want to choose canned or cooked fruits over raw fruits, because again, they just have a little bit less fiber. And then you want to choose well-moistened meat and have some kind of sauce on the side just to make it easier to digest. So meatloaf with gravy or ketchup is an excellent option. You can also have something that's just a little softer, like pulled beef or something like that. It's also going to be great. You want to limit dried meats like beef jerky, which could be a little harder to digest at this point. All right, so if you do have any questions about nutrition and colorectal cancer or just nutrition for cancer risk in general, you're welcome to put them in the chat and we can talk about them during the Q&A. But you can also, this is my phone number. You're welcome to call anytime if you have a more detailed or more private question. It's that 314-652-3663, extension 1113, and I will be able to help you out. So, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rachel. That was a lot of great information. Next up, I want to introduce Kathleen Finneran. She's a colon cancer survivor, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about her story and also her health journey. Kathleen, thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thanks for the invite. I was diagnosed in the fall of 2017 with colorectal cancer. I was 53 years old at the time and overdue for my first colonoscopy. So I had a whole lot of other stuff going on in my world, and I just kind of put it off. It had no family history. I've been healthy my entire life. It wasn't, unfortunately, a priority at that time. I had been experiencing some symptoms off and on for about a year, which I, again, kind of ignored, chalked them up to dietary issues. I thought I had developed some kind of a food intolerance to something that I just hadn't really taken the time to try to figure out. My symptoms, especially early on, were very similar to what my husband had experienced before being diagnosed with celiac disease. So that was an easy connection for me to make until it just became a little more discomfort. The discomfort became a little bit more over time. I was experiencing some dark, thin stools, all those things that I know now were symptoms and red flags that I should have been looking out for, but I wasn't. And then it got to the point where there was just a lot of, where it became just painful. I couldn't sit. I said, something's definitely wrong. I went to the hospital. 6 hours later in the emergency room, the nurse tells me that the oncologist will be in to see me shortly. And I was completely shocked, just absolutely shocked. Again, no family history of anything. It was blown away by the whole thing. The next 13 months were eventful. They weren't able to remove the tumor right away because of size. So I got a colostomy right away, had chemotherapy and radiation and everything involved with that. And then in June, the colonoscopy was taken down. I got an ileostomy while that healed. And then in November of the following year, so 13 months in total, is when the ileostomy takedown occurred. Throughout the course of all that, developed some heart issues from the chemotherapy. I had fluid on my lungs, just a whole host of other things that come along with all of that. So that was quite an eventful time. After that, I was on oral chemo for 2 years, and I am now almost 2 years off of that. So everything seems to be good. My biggest issues post-surgery have been just addressing the dietary piece of it. What can my system tolerate, and learning that. It took longer than I thought for my body to figure all that out. I really wasn't as prepared as I would have liked to have been for the post-surgery timeline and what to expect there. Really learned I had to baby my system for quite a while. It had to relearn how to work because it hadn't worked at all for 13 months and wasn't working particularly well for about a year prior to that. So I really had to have a very soft, simple diet for quite a while. I have just in the last couple of years been reintroducing more and more things. There are still the things I completely stay away from. Your red meats, your processed foods, which is, I like a good steak, I like, your hard salamis and those good foods. Those are completely out of my diet at this point, which is unfortunate. I also found I stay away from the cruciferous vegetables that I used to absolutely love. So there are things like that I miss, but I have managed to work other vegetables, well cooked, sautéed, back into my diet. I'm okay with chicken and turkey and a little bit of pork. Never any of those in huge amounts. I still do stick with a very simple, fairly soft diet that my body can easily manage. During the course of the two surgeries, the takedown of both the colostomy and the ileostomy, and because of where the tumor was located, I ended up losing about 20 to 25% of both my small and my large intestine, and I think, and then part of my rectum also. So I think my system just doesn't have the real estate that it used to do what it needs to do. So again, that's why I stick with fairly soft, simple diets. What I have learned is to be very in tune with the functioning of my system, of my colon. I've learned it's important for me to know not only what I can eat, but certainly how much I can eat, and what time of day I can eat. I have to be very, very cognizant of those things. I know that I need to be fairly close to a restroom within anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour after I eat. And then I'm generally good. But there is definitely an urgency issue, which I'm assuming is because of my shortened rectum. So as my brother told me when I was explaining this whole thing to him one day, he's like, "You have a storage issue." I said, "Yes, I have a storage issue." So the urgency is definitely a thing. In terms of lifestyle changes, other than the dietary piece of it, I haven't had to modify a whole lot, which I'm grateful for. I continue to work full time. I work for a great organization. My team has been fantastic, extremely supportive. Work doesn't cause me a huge amount of stress, which is fantastic. I know not everyone is in that kind of a situation. I get some exercise when I can, go out and get a walk when the weather's nice and do that. But, I wasn't a particularly unhealthy eater to start with, so there wasn't a whole lot that I had to modify in that regard. My weight has always been, pretty much under control, so I felt good about that. I don't think I had a lot of the traditional risk factors. So I'm kind of lucky in that regard. Managing stress, though, I think just in other aspects of my life is going to be critical for me, because that's part of why I was overdue for my colonoscopy in the first place. Side note, about 2.5 years before my diagnosis, my husband suffered a massive stroke. So I was thrust into a caregiver role and dealing with all the stresses involved in that. And I believe in my heart that was the trigger, that whatever might have been in my system just took off when my body was worn down from stress. So keeping that just mentally in a good place and managing that is great. I'll participate in a support group through the Cancer Support Center, which is very helpful. I enjoy, like I said, go for a walk when the weather's nice. I do adult coloring books. I find those very relaxing. But that's keeping the stress and keeping myself as healthy as I can. You know, masked up big time during the pandemic, and I still do if I'm going to be out somewhere where there's a whole lot of people. Just, I know it's important for me not to let my body wear down. My doctor has told me from the beginning, this is going to come back. It's just a matter of when, and everything that we can do to keep myself healthy and prevent that from happening as long as possible. You know, is only going to be, you know, to my benefit. I think that is pretty much my story.
Wonderful. Kathleen, thank you so much for sharing that story with us.
Very welcome.
Thank you. So this is the point in our webinar where we have an opportunity to ask our panelists more specific questions. So for those of you who have some questions, please go ahead and put those in the chat, and I can be reading those as we go along. I'm gonna go ahead and check the chat now to see if we have any questions. If not, I know that I have several questions for our panelists. So while those are kind of coming in, I do want to ask Dr. Klein's to speak about colon cancer risk. You know, are there certain people who are more at risk, and how do we know if we are in a high risk group? Is you know, what questions should we be asking our family or maybe our doctor? Can you speak more about that, Dr. Klein's?
Sure, absolutely. So it's important to remember that we know that colon cancer tends to increase with age. So age in and of itself is a risk factor. Increasing age is a risk factor for colon cancer. It's probably one of the most important risk factors for colon cancer. There are other risk factors, such as if you have a history of inflammatory bowel disease, like ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease. We know that those are significant risk factors for colon cancer. Smoking is a risk factor for colon cancer. Sedentary lifestyle is a risk factor for colon cancer. Diets that are high in fat, low in fiber are risk factors for colon cancer. Family history is a very important risk factor for colon cancer. If you have one first-degree relative who has had colon cancer, that's a significant risk factor for you. If you have multiple second-degree relatives who've had colon cancer, that's a significant risk factor for you. History of polyps, if you've had polyps, that's a risk factor. And you know, those are probably the top risk factors. Also, heavy alcohol consumption can be a risk factor. But those are the main risk factors. And again, you know, it's important to remember that age is very important. That's why we screen later in life and not earlier in life, unless you have, you know, a significant risk factor, or if you have one of the familial. There are some genetic strains of colon cancer, and of course, those individuals like FAP and Lynch syndrome, some of those individuals are screened earlier. But those are the main risk factors. And it's important, again, to discuss this with your doctor, particularly when you are approaching the age. Now, the American Cancer Society recommends everyone be screened beginning at age 45. So it's important to know what those risk factors are, and to if you have any of those, you should definitely talk with your doctor.
Wonderful, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. I have a question here for Rachel. Can you talk to us a little bit about how maintaining a healthy weight reduces an individual's risk of developing colon cancer, or is weight actually a factor in colon cancer? I know that weight is a factor in many cancers. And could you maybe explain why that would be?
Yeah, absolutely. So weight is a factor in colon cancer. It's not necessarily as big of a factor as some may have thought in the past. It's less, I guess, about weight and more about certain things that are associated with higher weights, if that makes sense. But as far as colon cancer risk goes, generally being at a healthy weight is something that is going to kind of lead to less of a cancer risk. But looking at a study this morning, actually, they found that the weight loss that you would need if you're not at a healthy weight is actually fairly doable. It's not like a gigantic number, like they don't want you losing 50 pounds or anything like that. The recommendation is presently losing about 2 pounds over the course of a decade, which does seem a little broad, but what I got from that recommendation is that they're generally recommending weight maintenance and losing at least 2 pounds over that time. So not like steadily gaining over the course of that 10 years, keeping your weight about the same, losing about 2 pounds there, if that makes sense. And trying to avoid a weight gain of 6 pounds every 5 years is another thing that they wanted to, which 6 pounds in 5 years is pretty easy to accumulate. But it is also something that is pretty easy to reduce over time, luckily. So that is not something that you necessarily have to go on a crash diet to do. You could just add more fruits and vegetables in, take out a little bit of other things, watch your portion sizes a little bit, and you can easily lose 6 pounds or 2 pounds over the course of that 10 years, which is awesome. But generally, a lot of the risks associated with that cancer aren't necessarily the abdominal fat or whatever the fat is specifically. It's things that that fat can potentially contribute to. So we know that higher weight can sometimes lead to higher blood pressure and other heart disease risk factors like that. But that doesn't mean that somebody who does have a higher weight can't reduce their risk of those things. So you can have a higher weight and still be eating quite healthfully. Lizzo is an excellent example. She eats very healthily. She exercises. I don't know if you've seen her live, but you can't just play the flute like that while you're dancing if you don't have excellent lung capacity. So she's a great example of somebody who doesn't really necessarily need to lose weight because she is actually quite healthy. So focusing on those kind of adjustable risk factors like your diet, exercise, stuff like that, rather than necessarily the number on the scale, is going to have a lot more of an impact. Again, if you are looking to lose weight, just kind of maintaining or going down about 2 pounds in 10 years.
Great help. Thank you. That was very helpful. I have a question here from somebody. I'm going to go ahead and read it right now. I am a vegetarian now, but could my diet from my past be... Okay, let me read this out loud. I am a vegetarian now, but could my diet from my past before making my lifestyle change affect my risk later? Okay, that makes sense. So previous diet, can that still impact, or did this person decrease their risk by going vegetarian and making that switch?
Yeah, so thank you for asking that. I think that's something that a lot of people have kind of in mind. So yes, going vegetarian now did decrease your risk. So cancer prevention is all about harm reduction and just like small things that you can do today to prevent that risk. So like getting rid of those red meats and those processed meats today over time is going to help kind of contribute to that lessened risk. So it does depend on how much you were doing before. Like if you were having a charcuterie board with hard salami every single day over the course of like 30 years, it might take a while to reduce those risks, but you are still definitely have definitely reduced that risk by adding in those extra fruits, vegetables, and lean proteins and taking out that other stuff. So that was great stuff. Not everyone needs to go vegetarian, it is a great option. But yeah, just lessening that red meat and processed meats is definitely going to help, even if it's just by 1 serving a week.
Great. Excellent question. So I have a question for Kathleen. The question is, how did you know that you had mentioned you reached out to cancer support community for a support group, and that's been something that's been helpful for you. How did you know that you needed to reach out for help? And then what were the steps you took to do that? Like, how did you know where to go?
Sure. For me, I just felt like I needed to have a group of people that I could talk to about kind of my experience of what I was going through all this. I don't have family in the area. Neither my husband and I have kids. We're not from this area, so we were kind of isolated. And I felt like I could just use some additional support. He had been participating in a support group related to his stroke, so I know the value of a support group. And I just went online and searched it, found the cancer support group, and really. It's been very, very helpful. I've landed with a great group of women. I'm the only one in the group that has colon cancer. The majority in the support group are breast cancer survivors or in various stages of treatment. I think that's just probably natural. But even with that, there are a lot of commonalities to the experience. And so it's been. I think it's been very, very helpful to me.
Wonderful. Thank you. We have another question here. This is for Dr. Clines. What is the main reason to have often colitis? The food or stress or both?
I'm sorry, what's the question again?
I'm reading it verbatim here. What is the main reason to have often colitis? The food or stress or both? So what are some reasons people have colitis? Is it food?
Yeah, so colitis is usually not related to food or stress. Most times when people have colitis, when I see colitis, it's usually a result of either an infection people have gotten. There are certain infections that can cause, the colon to become inflamed. There are also what we call autoimmune diseases like ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease that can also cause colitis. Colitis just simply means there's inflammation in the colon walls. And so that inflammation can lead to bleeding, it can lead to diarrhea. Colitis rarely is really related to any particular food. And certainly there's not much of a correlation between stress and colitis that I'm aware of. There is a relationship between stress and diseases of the upper tract, like peptic ulcer disease and things like that, but not necessarily with the colon. Unless there's a specific colon that they're referring to, that I'm not aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Here's another question that has come in. Is a fully plant-based diet recommended as the best diet to minimize cancer risk?
Yeah, happy to talk about that. So the fully plant-based diet is something that you can have kind of in your toolbox of prevention, if that makes sense. So you do not need to go completely vegan to prevent colon cancer. You can still get plenty of protein from the lean meats like chicken, turkey, fish, eggs, and dairy. But if you would prefer to go vegan, that is something that you can try, or you can even try kind of more of a flexitarian approach. Like I have meat like maybe once or twice a week for a variety of reasons, not necessarily for cancer prevention, but because meat is expensive, and a couple other things. But mainly, the diet recommendation is not a diet itself. It's just increasing your intake of the fruits and vegetables and the whole grains, and decreasing intake of the red meats and the processed meats. So that is something that could be accomplished with a plant-based diet, but that is also something that could be accomplished while still consuming meat and dairy.
Okay. Another question we have is around the idea of using probiotics. There's been a lot of conversation about probiotic and healthy gut bacteria, you know, in the media nowadays, and how does this help improve colon health, or does it? Is a probiotic recommended? Anyone? Dr. Clines or Rachel?
I was gonna say, I can answer a little bit of that. So probiotics are great for you, great for just the bacteria that's going on in your gut just in general. So probiotics can be found in things like Greek yogurt or kefir milk, or even kimchi, a lot of fermented things. So it is a great food that you should try to incorporate in your diet. Like, I personally have Greek yogurt every day, and part of the reason that I do that is because of the probiotics, which are great for your large and your small intestine. You don't necessarily have to take a probiotic supplement. If you do want to do that, that is something I would ask your doctor about, just to make sure that they are not interacting with other medications that you're taking. But increasing your intake of naturally containing probiotic foods is always great for you just in general. So probiotics are very popular right now. There is a lot of cool research that's coming out about gut health. A lot of it is still just looking at like bacteria in your gut. We're not like quite to the point where we've been able to replicate it in people, but there's very exciting things coming out with mice. So be on the lookout for that probably in the next couple of years, but it's a very big area of research right now. Yeah, probiotics are great for you.
Yeah, I agree. I think probiotics I recommend probiotics for pretty much all my patients, particularly those who have irritable bowel syndrome. And we know that you know, your colon has bacteria in it, and probiotics help to keep the bad bacteria in check. You know, there's some bacteria that can produce carcinogens, and again, probiotics will kind of help the balance in your colon. They're very important for helping produce vitamin K in your gut. So yeah, I agree with Rachel. I think probiotics are and you don't always have to get a pill. As she mentioned, you can buy different yogurts that have cultures in them. So yeah, I'm a strong advocate for probiotics.
And how do we know as consumers what type of probiotic to get? Do you get one that has to be refrigerated? Can you order the pills over Amazon? How do we know we're getting the right type of probiotic?
Sure. So I don't have necessarily a pill recommendation, but if you look on, like if you're looking at yogurts and you want to get a yogurt that has a probiotic in it, if you look in the ingredients, it'll actually list the probiotics in them, which is pretty cool. I want to say that most Greek yogurts have lactobacillus, but do not quote me on that one. But it'll say just right on the label, as far as in the foods, it'll just say what probiotic it has in it. I'm not 100% sure of the supplements themselves.
Yeah, I usually recommend patients to go with a yogurt. You know, it's you know, when you look at probiotics, when you buy pills, it will say on the label, you know, what different type of cultures are in there. But there have been studies that actually have shown that when they try and culture those cultures out, that half of them don't grow. So a lot of times people are getting something that really doesn't have, you know, what they claim to have in it. So I think the best way to avoid that is to go with a yogurt. I recommend Activia a lot for my patients, but there are others out there. But I think that's the best way.
Yeah, but Chobani will have it too. And the milk, you can generally find it in the dairy area. That is very full of probiotics. Also great. Not a beverage.
And there's questions coming in about you know, eating yogurt. So the question is around sugar, and a lot of yogurts are high in sugar. So how do we balance, you know, the good probiotic versus the extra sugar?
Yeah, so that is something that I'm always mindful of as someone who eats yogurt every day. I am trying to limit my sugar as well, because it can impact heart disease and other kinds of stuff. So yes, a lot of yogurts are going to be higher in sugar. You can find yogurts advertised with less sugar in them. So Chobani has one. That's the one that I'm eating. Not to shout out Chobani, but it's called Chobani Less Sugar. It's really good. It's still sweet. It does have less sugar in it. So if you do still want that sweet yogurt, like, it is still something that you can have. Or you can also get just plain Greek yogurt and put like berries or your own stuff in there, and that'll still get that.
Right. I would say, if you do want to take a pill, there is a probiotic called Align, ALIGN, that has been, proven to pretty much have in it what it says it has in it. And for my patients that don't want to, eat yogurt, I usually recommend they take Align. And again, it's spelled ALIGN. You can get it over the counter at any grocery store, supermarket, pharmacy.
Great. That's great to know. Okay, we have a question. I have regular bowel movements, hemorrhoids that sometimes bleed, and non-cancerous polyps removed. Am I at greater risk for colon cancer? And what can I do to decrease that?
I guess I'll handle that. So hemorrhoids are not a risk factor for colon cancer, but certainly colon polyps are. And so, if she's had a colonoscopy and polyps were detected, it's important to know, and I don't know everything about her pathology, but it's important to know the histology of the polyp, how many she had, and how large the polyps were. That would determine when she would get her next colonoscopy, whether it would be in 3 years, 5 years, or 7 years. But, as far as hemorrhoids go, hemorrhoids definitely are not a risk factor for colon cancer. But her risk is slightly increased. But again, we can avoid her getting colon cancer by just her getting her colonoscopies at the appropriate times.
Great, thank you. Okay, one more question. This one is for Kathleen. You had mentioned before, changing your diet, especially post-surgery. You talked about things that you avoid, and you mentioned, eating a soft, simple diet. Are you willing to share in more detail how you eat regularly? What are the foods that you eat? What are the meals that you prepare generally for the week?
Sure. My morning is usually an English muffin with a little cream cheese on it. My lunch will often be some cottage cheese and canned peaches, something along those lines. I may occasionally do a little pasta or a rice dish with something. Dinner, my diet for the most part is very, very simple. Dinner, lately I've been having a yogurt and some hard cheese, some cheddar cheese, and some crackers or pretzels. Occasionally I'll do something, usually at lunchtime, if that's what I'm making for my husband, with a chicken dish, something that's done in the slow cooker. I'll have a little bit of the chicken with some rice. Again, very, very simple foods. It's not to say that I can't have any of those other things at all. I certainly have enough to taste and make sure whatever I'm making for him works. But I do miss eating a more regular diet. I will sometimes at lunch do some sauteed zucchini and squash over rice. That's a big veggie day for me. When I do that, I love this time of year when I can get some good fresh vegetables and go that route. Tomato soup. I have 3 glasses of Metamucil a day, which helps me tremendously. And I can feel it if I miss one. But yeah, it's a very, very simple, not a very thrilling diet. A big day might be a couple slices of cheese pizza. So I don't get as much of the good veggies as I would really like to. I probably can, since I'm working at home. I've been working at home full time since the pandemic. I have felt a little bit more adventurous than when I was going into the office every day, in terms of what I'm willing to try, and when. I have, again, it's being in close proximity to a bathroom, like it or not. This is my reality, and knowing that I get extremely gassy from most foods. So the days that I do go into the office, I'm hyper careful about what I'm eating in order to know that will be less of an issue than what I can deal with at home. But as I said, very, very, very simple. I don't eat anything that's real complex, and that the body has to work real hard to deal with.
Thank you for sharing that. That's very insightful. We probably have time for one or two more questions. I am seeing another one in the chat. This is for Dr. Clines. If they find no cancer polyps removed on my colonoscopy in my 60s, when will I need another colonoscopy?
So if you've had a colonoscopy, no polyps were found, and your average risk, meaning you don't have any family history of colon cancer or inflammatory bowel disease, if you have a normal colonoscopy at age 60, you wouldn't receive your next one until age 70. So 10 years is the recommended interval between colonoscopies for an individual that has no risk factors and has a normal colonoscopy. So 10 years. So that person at age, if they had the colonoscopy at age 60, the next colonoscopy would be at age 70.
Okay. So no polyps is 10 years. So right. Is there a difference in time span if they find 1 or 2 polyps versus if they find, say, 10 or 12 polyps?
Right. That's a very good question. I mean, and that's why we have different intervals depending on how many polyps we find, how large those polyps are, and what kind of histology we see under the microscope. So all those things factors go into when we bring people back for the next colonoscopy. So in general, it's somewhere between 2 and 7 years, depending on, again, how many, and the size and the histology.
And Dr. Clines, if you have a family history and maybe you're not 45 yet, is there a way to get a colonoscopy earlier than 45? I know
absolutely.
Insurance is always a factor,
sure.
And that might prohibit some people from getting some screening.
Sure.
How do people work around that issue?
So that's a good question. So if you have for instance, if you have a first degree relative that was diagnosed with colon cancer, let's say at age 40. So that individual is the index case. That's the 40-year-old. And the rest of the family would start screening 10 years before the index case. So if you have a first degree relative is diagnosed with colon cancer at age 40, you would start your screening colonoscopies at age 30. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's how we determine, and the insurance companies are very good about, they're very good about honoring that because, they'd much rather pay for that colonoscopy than have to be in court with someone who got diagnosed with colon cancer because they would not allow or approve their screening colonoscopy. But in general, that's the rule. We start 10 years before the index case. Okay.
Right. That's really, really good information. I am scanning the chat one last time. I'm not seeing, am I seeing? Oh, I am seeing a new question. Is there any research indicating equal health benefits from non-dairy options such as soy milk or other milk substitutes versus dairy for those who maybe have trouble digesting dairy, or they choose not to use dairy for some reason?
Yeah, so I definitely can answer this. So this one, yes, there is a benefit to drinking non-dairy options because they are still going to provide you with the protein. So like soy milk is going to be, I believe, the highest in protein, and the other plant-based milks do have their own kind of different benefits. So soy milk is the highest in protein. I believe oat milk is fortified with B12, so it has all of that, which is something we normally get from meat. So people who are not eating meat can get everything they need with just a glass of oat milk, which is really cool. Almost all the plant-based milks are going to be fortified with vitamin D and calcium, which is something that you generally would get from milk. But I believe at this point, we have not figured out how to get the probiotics into the plant-based milks because I think they do need that lactose to survive, but I'm not 100% sure. But if you are following a plant-based diet and you do want to still get those probiotics, you can try other fermented foods like kimchi, and I believe there is also probiotics in kombucha, but check on that for you.
Great. Well, that sums up our question and answer session. This was super informative. I thought we got a lot of really amazing questions and, of course, some very informative answers. So I appreciate this time. So now I would like to turn things over to Maria Ojascastro. She is our teaching artist and culinary instructor, and I know that she has prepared a couple of dishes in mind that she's going to prepare for us today and kind of talk about sort of the benefits of eating the recipes that she has selected today. So Maria, I'll turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Danny. So I'm going to teach you how to do two recipes. One is a rice bowl that you can have for a snack or lunch or dinner. And then one is a dessert or snack, something that's sweet. In addition to being an artist and a culinary instructor, I also have a son who is a 20-year cancer survivor. So I don't feel like I'm following a diet and cooking food that's for cancer survivors. Just try to eat healthy, high protein, high antioxidants, high fiber, and really pretty food. Because if it's pretty, chances are it's going to have lots of vitamins and lots of antioxidants. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you how to make a bento bowl. And it requires 2 cups of rice, brown rice. I'm Filipino. We love our white rice. So when I make rice for the family, I do 1 cup of brown rice, 1 cup of white rice. Then I have local honey. One of the teachers that I work with has, their family has a honey farm, which it's good to have local honey versus honey that's traveled a long ways. Then it's a 1/4 cup of low sodium soy sauce. And all these recipes, you'll get all these recipes and we'll put them in the chat. And then a pound of shrimp that has tails off and it's been shelved, and for convenience, it's already cooked. I bought it frozen this morning and I've been just letting it sit and defrost slowly. So it's going to be nice and ready to use today. If you don't eat shrimp, you can replace it with chicken. If you don't eat chicken, you can replace it with another protein. I actually grow edamame in my organic garden, so that's a really good option. And then a 1/2 tablespoon of rice vinegar. I have a ton of rice vinegar because we cook with that a lot in our house. But if you don't cook with rice vinegar, use whatever vinegar you have. Cider vinegar. I bet a lot of you have cider vinegar now in your cupboard. A cup of cucumbers that's diced. I don't peel my cucumbers when I get a cucumber that has a thin skin on it because it's not as bitter. The texture is nice and it's pretty. The recipe says an inch of fresh garlic. I don't know a lot of other people that buy fresh garlic, but this is what fresh garlic looks like. You'll usually get it. It has like little ends of it, but it's in the produce department, and you're going to peel it and shred it. A cup of carrots cut thinly. Again, convenience. Buy it bagged. 1 avocado, and if you like it spicy, sriracha sauce. We have it. Half the family, half of my family likes it. Half of the family doesn't. So that's optional. So we're going. Oh, so the recipe that Danny sent me so nicely in a nice brochure of a lot of options of healthy recipes for those who are going through cancer treatment. It's not only for people going through cancer treatment. All the recipes I was looking through, I was like, this is difficult to choose because all of them look delicious for anyone in the family, and it's healthy. So really easy. Prep the rice ahead of time. The recipe says prep the rice ahead of time. If you don't cook rice very often, you rinse your rice. Then if you have 2 cups of rice, you put 2.5 cups of water, and then you bring it to a boil. And then once it hits boil, don't open your lid. That's one of the better secrets to have a nice texture. Don't open the lid, keep it shut, and then put it on simmer for 20 minutes. So one mistake, I've taught all my sons, I have 3 adult sons, I've taught all of them to cook rice. One common mistake is if you put it all the way on low. So if you have if low is 1, 2, 3, put it on 2 or 3, because if you put it on just 1, you're going to have rice that doesn't cook all the way in 20 minutes, and you have that crunchy texture instead of that really nice soft texture. Then you're going to build your bowl. Rice already made, nice and warm. Put it in a pretty bowl. Always important, pretty. Fill your bowl with. If you're trying to have small meals, this is really good. Just a little bit of rice. But if I've been working in my organic garden and I'm really hungry, I'm going to give myself a lot of rice. I like fresh ginger. I know some of my boys don't like as much fresh ginger, so I'm going to put a lot. Going to make it pretty with some cucumbers. Still has a peel on it. They have extra fiber. Put some pretty carrots on top. My protein of choice today is going to be the shrimp, which I'm having difficulty opening it. Let's see. There we go. I need a lot of protein to have the energy to get through the rest of the day, so I'm going to be generous with my shrimp. And then the sauce that's going to go on top of it is the soy sauce, the honey, the vinegar. I have so many jars. I don't need another bowl to clean. So I'm put all that, shake it up. Put some on. And there's a delicious lunch or snack or dinner that's going to be really filling. But in my household, we like a lot of sweets Campbell, my cancer survivor, he loves his sweets. One of the common things I make is fruit smoothies, and I'm not making fruit smoothies today, but I'm just going to refer back to what a lot of other people said. I always have yogurt, Greek yogurt that's not sweetened in my refrigerator, and I always picking up bags of frozen fruit. Throw the frozen fruit, the yogurt, put some honey in it, or I grow stevia in my garden. You can just put a little bit of stevia leaves in there, and oh, it's so much sweeter. It's a fraction amount of stevia per honey or sugar. And Campbell loves lemonade. I'll squeeze lemon almost any fruit smoothie, and that just gives it it makes it, it brightens it up, and you feel like you're having something sweeter if you are if you're making a smoothie. Okay, but the real recipe that you're going to get the ingredients for is chocolate hummus. Oh my goodness, when I saw this, I'm like, well, that's a little weird. I love hummus, I love chocolate. Can you put it together? You can. So what, really easy. Okay, 1 can of garbanzo beans or chickpeas. When I'm looking at it, where's chickpeas? Oh, it's actually garbanzo beans. Drain it. A fourth a cup of 100% cocoa. That's not sweetened. If you taste it, it's not going to taste good that way. It's going to taste great in a minute. And a tablespoon of maple syrup. We always put our maple syrup in the refrigerator. Some maple syrup is, if you don't put it in the refrigerator, it's going to go bad, and you're not going to know it's bad. You're going to use it, and you'll won't agree with you. A quarter cup of peanut butter. This is a new discovery for me. No sugar added in this organic peanut butter that you can get at Schnucks or at Aldi's. It tastes so good. You don't have to have sugar in your peanut butter. Okay, 3 tablespoons of honey, a quarter teaspoon of salt, and a quarter teaspoon of vanilla. It's going to make it nice and sweet. You're going to put everything. Oh, this was new to me also. Medjool dates. I'm like, oh my goodness, I hope this is in my grocery store. Not only did they have cute little boxes that had the correct amount, you only need 3 of these dates that are already peeled, but then you can they also had huge containers of it. Who would have known that these are so commonly used? They are, oh my gosh, delicious and sweet. You can this is a good snack in itself. You're going to put everything in your blender. You don't have to listen to me blend it. Blend it up, and then scoop it out and serve it in a pretty cup. So this, I am not going to eat all this as much as I want to eat all this. I'm going to serve that with a big bowl of berries or apple slices or crackers. You know, my household of 4 adults will have this for dessert. You don't need to eat all of it. I wish you were here because, oh my gosh, it is so delicious. You would never think that beans to this would be a really good pudding-like dessert. Okay, I've got 2 ingredients because of course I'm live. One is when you blend it, it says between a quarter cup and a half a cup of water. I use an entire half a cup of water. If you want it smoother, you use a little bit more water and blend it. If you want it creamier, you might want to put a little bit of almond milk in it, increase some of the good healthy stuff. And I forgot one thing in my bento bowl, and I really wanted to show you this. So I pre-chopped everything and pre-shredded, but the avocado, I have lots of siblings that are doctors, and one of the biggest rules for when this whole pandemic started was no one go to the emergency room during a pandemic. You don't want to be there. So a really common emergency room run is cutting your hand, cutting open an avocado. So this is one of the things I am going to show you. So you are going to, let's see, dietitian said, even though there's a protected covering on an avocado, you're going to wash it, right? So we're going to wash that avocado because we don't want our knife putting the germs in there. And then take a sharp knife. The sharper, the better. A sharp knife, you'll get less accidents. If you have to make more an effort with your dull knife, you can slip more easily. I put my sharp knife in there until I felt the seed. I am putting a kitchen cloth on my hand, put it there because no one wants to cut your hand. I'm turning it so it's all the way around. Twisted it so the seed's on one side, and I could do that really easily because in the grocery store, I squeezed the avocados until I found one. Oh, that's not too hard. That's not too soft. That's just right. If you make guacamole, you want the avocado to be guacamole ready. Then, actually, I'm going to even use a sharper knife for this. For effect, my big knife. So many people would do this and not put a cloth on. I just barely tapped it, so now it's stuck. Twist it, it comes out. And I didn't cut myself. Okay, so now, because this is extra, Rachel, protein and fiber, right?
Not protein in the avocado, but you can get a lot of healthy fats from the avocado.
Healthy
Plus
fat.
all the antioxidants, the fiber. I just love avocados. They're great.
I'm sorry, say that again. Yes, healthy fats and
healthy fats, antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, fiber.
Okay, fiber.
All wonderful. Love those.
Okay, so I put little slits in my avocado. I'm gonna scoop it up, and I'm gonna put it on top of my, look, it's even prettier and more delicious. And since I'm one of the family members who does like sriracha, even more delicious and benefits to sriracha. I bet there's some like vitamin C or something in it, maybe?
I think so. I think sriracha is a pepper. I don't know if it's sriracha pepper, but there should be some vitamin C and some other vitamins and minerals in there.
Okay.
Spicy food's just good also. And
then random things from my garden that add more. This is, which I can remember. It's a grain that actually has protein, and I'm fogging on the name of it. Put it in there, even prettier and even healthier. Where's my fork? Let's see, is it delicious? I wish you were here. So
we do too. You're making us all hungry.
And right beside me, I always have a cup or bottled water of either ice water. Always add ice to it because it just makes it delicious. More delicious. I'm going to drink it more often. Or I'll throw a tea bag that has a little bit of flavoring, and then suddenly it becomes flavored water really, really quickly, you know, without the, and usually I'll use green tea with like pomegranate, something that makes it even more delicious, because I gotta stay hydrated. So, if you heard, that was my alarm to tell me to stop talking, because we're going to wrap it up unless anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Maria. We're all starving now. That looks so delicious. We really appreciate you demonstrating those recipes for us. And I know that we will be making those recipes available to the people who joined our webinar today. We've got those supplements available. And one of the questions that actually came in too is whether or not any of the slide decks will be provided from our panelists. So if those can be made available, great. We'll share those. We'll provide those slide decks. I also wanted to announce that we will not be having a post test, but it's very important that you take the evaluation that we have available. So please take the evaluation, let us know your feedback. And before we wrap up, I just again want to thank all of our panelists. This was amazing information. I know that I benefited from this information, and I'm sure all of our participants did today as well. And I just wanted to thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, your personal stories. We really, really appreciate that. And I know that the link is up for everybody to take the evaluation. And with that, I think we will go ahead and wrap up for the day. Thank you so very much.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.